Step away from the vehicle. Now! The command sliced through the afternoon air like a blade, drawing startled glances from pedestrians nearby. Officer Kevin Maddox stood tall, eyes narrowed, hand hovering near his holster. In front of him, a teenage boy, black, no more than 15, froze mid-motion, just inches from the door handle of a silver sedan. I dropped my keys inside, the boy stammered. This is my mom's car. But Maddox wasn't listening. He took 2 hard steps forward, voice rising. Hands where I can see them. The boy, Tyrell Gaines, wore a black t-shirt and dark jeans. He looked clean, calm, confused. Not a threat, just a student waiting for his mother. But at that moment, none of it mattered. Across the sidewalk, people slowed their steps. Some stopped. Some looked away. Albany, New York, 5:30 p.m. The streets buzzed with the end-of-day rush. Office workers, food couriers, parents picking up their kids. But in this one parking lot, silence was spreading fast. Thick, uneasy. I didn't do anything, Tyrell tried again, his voice trembling. Before he could say another word, Maddox yanked his arm behind his back, pressing him against the hood of the car. Metal met skin. Tyrell winced. Officer Miguel Santos stood nearby, his posture stiff. Younger, newer, uncertain. His eyes darted between Maddox and the boy, lips pressed into a tight line. A woman pushing a stroller paused but didn't speak. A delivery biker pulled off his earbuds and watched. A suited man slowed down, then walked on. Tyrell's voice cracked. I can show you the text from my mom. The cuffs clicked shut. No crime, no weapon, just skin, suspicion, and silence. And in that moment, the whole block became a mirror, reflecting the quiet fear that too many had learned to accept. Tyrell's cheek was pressed against the cold metal of the car. His hands, cuffed behind his back, twitched slightly as he tried to adjust his weight without drawing more ire from Officer Maddox. His lips trembled as he whispered again, This is my mom's car. I have her messages. Maddox stood tall behind him, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, jaw clenched with authority. You match the report. Stop talking unless you want to add obstruction to your charges. There were no sirens, no yelling, no dramatic outbursts, but the tension in the air was thicker than any alarm. A woman in a business suit slowed her steps, looking over her shoulder. She furrowed her brow as she took in the scene. An unarmed black teenager, already in cuffs, standing beside a clean, undamaged car. Her lips parted, as if she might say something. Then she shook her head slightly, adjusted her purse strap, and walked on. A middle-aged white man standing by a food truck watched silently. He whispered to the vendor, Kids these days, probably up to something. The vendor, an older black man, didn't answer, just stared, his eyes hardening, lips tight. Across the street, a young delivery worker, Latino, barely 20, had pulled out his phone. He raised it to record, but a woman beside him muttered, Put that away. You don't want trouble. He paused, then lowered his hand. The stroller-pushing mom from earlier now crossed to the other side of the street, her child squirming in the seat. Come on, baby, she whispered. Let's keep moving. Everyone saw, no one acted, and somewhere in that crowd, someone even said it out loud. Well, if the police stopped him, there must be a reason. That one sentence floated like a cold wind through the cluster of onlookers. It did not scream, it did not accuse, but it was enough to make the others nod and shift their gaze elsewhere. Tyrell swallowed hard. The cuffs felt heavier now. His heart pounded, not just from fear, but from knowing that every second passed was a second of silent confirmation, that he didn't matter enough for someone to say, stop. And still, Maddox stood tall, glancing around as if daring someone, anyone, is to question him, but no one did, not yet. Have you ever stayed silent because speaking up felt too dangerous? The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut was quiet, but in that moment, it landed like a gunshot. Tyrell stood still, wrists bound, eyes wide with disbelief. His breathing had slowed, not from calm, but from the helpless resignation that often follows panic. Across the street, footsteps approached, measured, steady, deliberate. Danielle Avery crossed between 2 parked cars, blending into the end-of-day rush like any other woman heading home. Her slate blue suit wasn't flashy. Her white shirt was crisp, but unremarkable. No makeup, no flashy accessories. Her curly, slightly frizzy hair caught the soft breeze. On her wrist, a worn Hamilton watch peeked out from beneath her sleeve. She paused at the edge of the sidewalk, taking in the scene without saying a word. Cuffed black teenager. White officer standing over him. Second officer, Latin, younger, off to the side, uneasy. Half a dozen bystanders watching, but not acting. Danielle's jaw tightened. Then she stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the tension without raising an octave. "Is this young man under arrest?" Officer Maddox didn't look at her right away. His attention was on Tyrell, who dared a glance toward the voice, eyes locking briefly with hers. When Maddox did turn, his eyes traveled up and down quickly. Civilian. Black woman. No badge in sight. "Ma'am, step back," he said sharply. "This doesn't concern you." Danielle remained still. "I believe it does," she replied calmly. "You've detained a minor. I'm asking under what grounds?" Maddox let out a short, sarcastic chuckle. "You some kind of lawyer or something?" A beat passed. Santos looked up from his silence, eyes lingering a second too long on Danielle's face. Recognition flickered. Barely. Danielle ignored the question. Does he match a wanted suspect? Has he threatened anyone? Or is he just guilty of unlocking a car while being black? That last word landed like a weight. A murmur swept through a few people nearby. Low, unsure. Maddox's jaw twitched. He stepped forward, trying to assert control. "Lady, I told you. Step back." But she didn't. Her feet didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. And in that simple defiance, quiet, composed, unwavering, something shifted in the air. "Ma'am, you're interfering with an active investigation," Maddox snapped, his tone laced with irritation. "If you don't step back right now, I'll have to detain you as well." Danielle's expression didn't shift. Her voice remained calm, almost disarmingly so. "You've detained a minor in a public space without stating a charge. I'm asking you to clarify your justification." Maddox took a step closer, attempting to intimidate. "This isn't your business." Danielle didn't move. "It became my business the moment you laid hands on a child without cause." The words weren't loud, but they cut clean. Maddox's lips thinned. He was acting suspicious, he snapped, trying to get into a car that clearly wasn't his. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "You know that for a fact?" He was fidgeting, looking around. Then he reached inside. "To retrieve his keys," Danielle finished for him, "which he dropped, by his own admission, in a vehicle he says belongs to his mother." Maddox glanced at Santos, who still hadn't said a word. The younger officer's jaw was tight, eyes on the pavement. Danielle continued, her tone unwavering. "Does he have any prior offenses? Has he raised his voice? Resisted? Reached for a weapon?" Maddox hesitated. "No, but..." "Then what crime has he committed, officer?" Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. A murmur passed through the gathering crowd. A woman near the back whispered, "She's not just some random lady." A teenage boy, phone in hand, leaned to his friend. "I think she's someone important." Another bystander, Asian, mid-30s, had started recording on his phone, holding it high above the heads of others. The red light blinked steadily. Danielle took a half step forward, not threatening, just firm. "Let me be clear. If you cannot state a charge, you have no lawful grounds for restraint. That's not opinion. That's statute." Maddox's face flushed slightly, a mix of anger and sudden uncertainty. His posture straightened. But Danielle's gaze didn't waver. It wasn't force. It wasn't yelling. It was something far more difficult to challenge. Quiet authority. And for the first time, Officer Kevin Maddox looked like a man unsure of whether he was still in control. For a moment, no one spoke. Danielle's words still lingered in the air, as sharp and clean as a courtroom gavel. Officer Maddox opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. His hand hovered near his belt, not reaching for a weapon, just grasping for control. Terrell stood motionless. His eyes darted between Maddox and Danielle, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Then somewhere in the growing crowd, a voice broke the silence. I think she's someone in government. A teenager no older than 16 held up his phone with one hand while scrolling furiously with the other. His eyes widened. Yo, that's Danielle Avery. A pause, then an older woman gasped loudly. That's her! Danielle Avery! She's the state's chief inspector. The murmurs spread like a ripple in water. Faces turned. Phones tilted upward. Whispers turned to gasps. Recognition bloomed, slow but unstoppable. Danielle didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply reached into the inner pocket of her blazer, pulled out a black leather badge holder, and flipped it open. Danielle Avery, she said clearly, raising it just high enough for everyone nearby to see. Chief Inspector for the New York State Commission for Justice Oversight. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. Officer Santos took a half step back. His eyes dropped to her credentials and then flicked quickly to Maddox. His silence deepened. Maddox froze. The shift was immediate. His shoulders tightened, his jaw locked. His gaze dropped, just for a split second, enough for everyone to see. The crowd reacted first with silence, then with a low wave of reaction. Oh my God, why not? That's her. She's the one from the hearings last year. One woman began clapping. Another joined in. The moment was changing. Danielle looked directly at Maddox. So again, officer, she said, her voice now razor sharp but never raised. What is your legal justification for detaining this young man? Maddox swallowed, hard. His authority, once absolute in that circle of silence, now cracked under the weight of the truth. Danielle hadn't needed force. She didn't raise her voice. She simply arrived and reminded everyone what accountability looked like. This doesn't change anything, Maddox muttered, though his voice had lost much of its edge. His hands now rested stiffly at his sides, and his eyes avoided both Danielle and the crowd. Danielle took a slow step forward. On the contrary, she replied, it changes everything. Her words weren't loud, but they landed with the weight of fact. Under New York State Justice Oversight Protocol 18C, she continued, I have full legal authority to intervene in any incident involving suspected misconduct, excessive force, or unlawful detainment. Maddox didn't respond. Danielle's eyes shifted toward Officer Santos. You've seen the situation, you've heard the boy, you've witnessed your partner's conduct. As the ranking oversight official present, I am giving you a direct instruction. Santos hesitated. His fingers twitched near his belt. The crowd was watching him now, phones angled in his direction, expressions unreadable. Remove the cuffs, Danielle said, more firmly this time. Now! Maddox stepped forward suddenly. You don't outrank us in the field. I outrank you in matters of accountability, Danielle cut in. And if you interfere again, I'll have you formally cited for obstruction of civilian protection oversight. The silence cracked. Santos looked at Maddox once, then turned toward Tyrell. With slow, deliberate movements, he reached for the cuffs. The metal clicked again, this time softer. Not the clench of power, but the release of tension. Tyrell flinched slightly, then looked up at Santos. Their eyes met briefly, one filled with fear, the other with quiet apology. The cuffs came off. A pause. Then, from somewhere near the back of the crowd, someone began to clap. It started as one pair of hands, then another, then another. Within seconds, a small wave of applause moved through the street. Danielle didn't raise her arms. She didn't smile. She simply turned toward Tyrell, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. You're safe now, she said quietly. We're not done, but you're not alone anymore. Tyrell swallowed hard, blinking fast. And in that moment, the balance shifted. Power no longer sitting in the hands of a badge, but in the voice of someone who dared to use it. The crowd was still murmuring when the low rumble of a second patrol car echoed down the block. Its lights were off, but the energy shifted the moment it pulled into view. The door opened and out stepped Lieutenant Naomi Weller. Tall, composed, late 40s, her uniform crisp, her posture unmistakably commanding. She scanned the scene quickly. The crowd, the boy now free, Officer Maddox still frozen in place, and Danielle Avery, calm, centered, in full control. Her expression changed instantly. Madam Chief Inspector, she said, approaching Danielle with a nod of deep respect. Danielle returned the nod. Lieutenant Weller, Weller's gaze shifted to Maddox. Explain. Maddox started. There was a report, young male matching a vague description near a vehicle. He seemed... Danielle raised one hand. Lieutenant, I've already initiated on-site protocol under Statute 18C. I've ordered the removal of cuffs and am requesting an immediate internal review. Weller didn't hesitate. Understood. She turned to Maddox. You are to turn over your body cam immediately and consider yourself under active review. You are relieved from field duty effective now. What? Maddox blurted out, but the words fell flat. No one backed him. Weller didn't even turn. Escort yourself to the station. If you refuse, we'll make it official. Maddox's jaw clenched. He looked to Santos, but the younger officer wouldn't meet his gaze. Danielle stepped slightly forward. Officer Santos, I'll be expecting your incident statement, full and unedited, by morning. Santos swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Someone in the crowd cheered, then another. The applause that followed wasn't for spectacle. It was for truth, for clarity, for the rare moment when a system faced itself and blinked first. Tyrell, still standing beside Danielle, looked around, eyes wide, confused, overwhelmed. The people who once stared at him like a suspect now looked at him with something else. Empathy. Danielle placed a hand gently on his back. This was never about just you, she whispered. And he nodded. By sundown, the videos had already gone viral. The first post came from a high school sophomore named Malik, who had filmed the moment Danielle revealed her badge. His caption was short but powerful. Chief Inspector stops illegal arrest live. Watch this woman dismantle injustice in real time. In less than an hour, the clip had over 50,000 views. By midnight, it had reached 2 million. News outlets picked it up quickly. Local stations ran it on the evening broadcasts, followed by state networks. By morning, national media anchors were saying her name, Danielle Avery. The headlines varied, but the sentiment didn't. A chief inspector confronts abuse of power. Teen saved from wrongful arrest by the one woman who could. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. On Twitter, hashtag surged, Stand with Danielle, Justice not fear, Tyrell Gaines deserve better. Celebrities, activists, and even a few unlikely politicians posted support. Tyrell's name began trending by dawn. His mother, who had rushed to the precinct when called, cried openly as she embraced her son. You didn't deserve that, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Danielle hadn't stayed for the cameras. She rarely did. Instead, she returned quietly to her office just after 8 that night. The blinds were drawn. The door was shut. Inside, she opened her terminal and began typing. Case ID, Gaines Incident, initiated by oversight breach. Officer involved, Kevin Maddox. Witness statement pending. Public video review in progress. Formal inquiry begins immediately. Her fingers paused for a moment. She stared at the cursor, blinking, steady and patient. Then she continued typing, each word exact, emotionless, but fueled by a fire that had burned in her since her earliest days in law school. Since her own brother had once been accused of stealing a car he had washed for work. This wasn't about one boy. This was about the weight of every boy who had stood in Tyrell's place, with no one watching. Until now. The press conference wasn't planned. It wasn't part of Danielle's usual approach. She preferred internal reviews, silent enforcement, and concrete action over headlines. But this time was different. The city had seen the footage. The state had watched it play out in real time. And people, so many people, had started asking, not just what happened, but what it meant. So she stood at a modest podium on the steps of the Oversight Commission building, just as the sun began to set behind her. No teleprompter, no prepared statement, just her presence and the truth. I won't speak long, she began. A hush fell over the gathered crowd and reporters. What happened to Tyrell Gaines wasn't an isolated mistake. It wasn't just about one bad decision. It was about fear and silence and the dangerous assumption that looking like him means you must have done something wrong. Her voice remained steady, controlled, but behind it, a tide of emotion waited, barely held back. Being black in public shouldn't feel like probable cause. A sharp silence followed. Not empty, charged. She continued. He was trying to get his keys, that's all. But his skin turned a normal moment into a confrontation. And too many of us have come to accept that as routine. Danielle looked out over the crowd, past the lights, past the cameras. Some of you stood and watched. Some of you filmed. And some of you said nothing. She let that linger. I'm not here to assign guilt to anyone but those who hold the badge. But we can't keep pretending we don't know how this happens. We know. We've always known. The difference today is someone saw it. A murmur spread. Guilt, recognition, pain. Then she said, this office will conduct a full investigation, not just into the officers involved, but into how many complaints like this have gone unacknowledged. A beat. I believe in justice, but not the kind that waits for tragedy. I believe in the kind that steps in before a boy gets cuffed on the sidewalk. The crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in unity. Voices shouted, thank you, Chief. We see you. Say it again. Danielle stepped back from the podium, but before she left, she looked directly into one of the cameras. Her eyes held the message that her words didn't need to repeat. We are watching now, all of us, and we're not looking away again. 1 week later, the video had been viewed over 30 million times. Major outlets ran deep dive segments. Schools used it in civic discussions. Police departments across the country quietly reviewed their policies. But Danielle Avery didn't care about the numbers. She cared about the change. At a closed-door session with the State Police Board, she laid out the foundation of a new initiative, the Shield and Mirror Project, a program designed to support citizen reporting of misconduct, expand training for accountability, and implement real-time review systems within law enforcement, not to punish, but to reflect and to rebuild. Her voice in the room wasn't angry. It was deliberate, strategic, unshakable. 2 days later, Officer Kevin Maddox was officially suspended, pending a formal misconduct investigation. His record, once clean, now carried a serious stain. Officer Santos, on the other hand, submitted a formal statement, one of the first in the department to do so without delay. He later volunteered for the internal reform pilot group, quietly, without camera crews. Meanwhile, Terrell returned to school. At first, he dreaded it. He expected stares, whispers, jokes. But when he walked into his homeroom, something unexpected happened. His classmates clapped. One friend bumped fists with him. A teacher placed a hand on his shoulder. For the first time in a long while, Terrell felt something rare, believed. He started walking straighter, speaking louder, not because the fear had disappeared, but because someone, one person, had stood up beside him when it mattered. Days later, Danielle received a letter. It was handwritten, shaky in some places, bold in others. Dear Ms. Avery, thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I didn't know grown-ups like you existed. I hope one day I can be like you. Sincerely, Tyrell Gaines. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into a drawer at her desk. Then she stood by the window. Sunlight cut across the room, catching the corner of her face. Her reflection in the glass was calm, solid, ready. Change didn't always roar. Sometimes it walked in quietly, wearing a slate blue suit, asking the right questions, and refusing to walk away.